Brittany, I am a super fan of a local dry cleaner, and I would love to tell you the story into how that came to be.
Absolutely.
About, 3 or 4 years ago, I had an uncle pass away. And in typical fashion, I go to get my suit, and it is completely wrinkled at the bottom of my closet, not at all ready. And he didn't pass away unexpectedly, but it was something where I probably should have had my suit ready. Anyway, I call one local dry cleaner. They say they can't get it done in time. Okay, great. I call somebody else, and they say something along the lines of, Brad, this will usually take 2 to 3 days, but get it here now and we'll take care of it. So I drop everything I'm doing. I rush the suit over. They're beyond sympathetic, beyond empathetic, completely understanding of the situation, and they have it ready by the time they open the next morning. I will forever recommend this dry cleaner to anybody in Buffalo, New York. And I have recommended this dry cleaner to anyone in Buffalo, New York. And when I was sitting and thinking about how I would start this conversation with you, the thing that I keep coming back to is it's not necessarily the service that blew me away, but it was the experience and how they made me feel that blew me away. And that to me is why I will continuously consider myself a super fan of Johnny's over here in Buffalo. And I know this is something that you specialize in. You have your book, Superfans, and it's something that you are incredibly passionate about. What's that mean for someone like you?
Well, I love that story, first of all. And, one of the things I ask people sometimes is, like, when's the last time you left a 3-star review? And most people kind of laugh and say, I don't think I ever have. And I say, right, most people never have, because we forget about neutral experiences. When something is good enough to just meet our expectations, we have forgotten about it almost immediately because there are so many things happening in life. And so what our brain tends to remember are the really great and the really not so great. And just a couple of weeks ago, my chief of staff is expecting her first little one. And she and her husband were in a friend's wedding party. And so she had dropped off his suit and her dress to be altered. And they were there for like a month. And, they said, oh, we're picking it up this day, whatever. And Alex was getting 6 or 8 inches or something taken up from the bottom of her dress. So it was not going to be something she could wear without this alteration. So she goes to pick them up and finds out that her husband's suit had been altered, but her dress was untouched. And she called them and was like, I don't think anything was ever done. And they were like, oh, yeah, I guess we never had anybody work on it. And she was like, well, the wedding's in 3 days. You've had it for 5 weeks. Why was this not done? And they were like, yeah, sorry, we didn't get it done. And she was like, I need you to do it. Like this, I can't wear this when I'm in the wedding party. And they gave her such a hard time, and they were such jerks about doing it. And they were we'll try our best to get it done, but no guarantees. And never apologized to her for the fact that they had this for several weeks and didn't get it done, or the fact that they sent her a notification saying it's ready to be picked up when in fact it hadn't been worked on. And she was just flabbergasted by how did this fall through the cracks? B, why was there never an apology? Why was there never any kind of accountability? And so she, on the other hand, is going to tell everybody she knows, don't use this dry cleaner who also happens to have the alteration service. And so I love your example of what the team at Johnny's did, because they came through for you. They were empathetic. They met that moment with more than you were expecting to get, it sounds like. And so in my book, Creating Superfans, I talk about all of the touch points and all of the things that we can train everyone on our team to do to exceed our customers' expectations so that they don't forget about us. It's not just the neutral experience that's good enough to be forgotten, but we're actually creating advocates, people who don't just want to come back and work with us again, but are actively sharing their experiences, telling friends, so that our customers create more customers.
In staffing and recruiting, this seems like it should be in everybody's playbook, right? We're constantly looking for more orders. We're looking for better clients, more clients, but we're almost going about it the wrong way. We're talking about how our service is better. We're talking about how we might be better, faster, stronger, how our time to fill might be quicker, but we're not creating these lasting impressions on the clients that we already have. It seems to me like we almost have the scripts written poorly or incorrectly.
Yeah, a lot of times I see people, not just in the staffing industry, but in lots of industries, sort of over-index on these commodity factors, talking about how fast we are, how affordable we are, how close we are to you, right? We're the solution down the street, whatever. These things that when we go all in or even like heavy on those things, somebody else can come along and be a little bit faster, a little bit closer, a little bit cheaper. And now all of a sudden, like if that was our whole branding, positioning, that's gone. And so a better way to do it is A, figure out what it is that really makes you unique, that really sets you apart, and B, like over index to that thing. So maybe that it's that you're going to be the one that's the most reliable. You're going to be the one that comes through, no matter what. Like it's got to be something that's defensible. And it's got to be something that people remember. One of the things that I like to say is you've got to connect your story to theirs. You've got to make the thing you do so relevant to their need that they're going to remember it. So that, in staffing, you've got executives that are moving all the time. So everyone, not just your direct point of contact, but everyone in that sort of sphere of influence, those are the people that you can make an impression on so that when they go to the next job, when they, change firms, they're actually advocating for you. They're saying like, why are we using these other guys? I have a great partner that I've worked with for, however long, or here's somebody who's come through for me all the time. Like you can turn anyone into a super fan so that this advocacy happens beyond just that one like economic buyer in the moment.
Yeah. How do we put that into place? I love that thought process, but I'm thinking top down, how do we create and how do we enable our recruiters to create super fans from the candidates that enter our door?
So, okay, we're talking about candidates
Sure.
instead of partners. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the one thing I have like a framework that we can kind of talk briefly about if you want. It's something that I call the super model. And the idea is that if you want to create super fans, you've got to be super. And the acronym is start with your story, understand their story, personalize, exceed expectations, and repeat. And what I always say, like I said before, super fans are created at the intersection of your story and theirs. So if we're talking about these recruiters that are talking to candidates, it's really about understanding A, what your uniqueness is as the staffing company, right? Like, what is it that we are the best in the world at? Like, why do we deserve super fans? Why should someone care about working with us versus working with somebody else who seems a lot like us, looks a lot like us, like maybe their website has some of the identical language, and if you took our logo off or their logo off, you might not be able to distinguish between the two of us. So that's the first part is like, what is it that we're doing that deserves super fans? Like that dry cleaner is like, we're going to make sure it happens, even if it means staying a little bit late, showing up a little bit early. When somebody has a need, we will be there. And even if that's not explicitly like written, that is the, clearly the ethos of Johnny's in Buffalo, New York. And then that second pillar of Super You is all about understanding their story, which is really more about empathy than it is authority. It's understanding what is this candidate need in this moment? Like, what do I need to do to show up and help them? And if you're talking to 20 different people on a Tuesday, you might be doing 20 different things. You might be talking about or paying attention to or controlling for all of these different variables. But sometimes that's what it takes because when somebody feels like a number, it's when they start to think of you as just a commodity provider.
I think that's how the industry acts as a stereotypical industry that I've seen now for 13 years. I think candidates feel like they're a number in a system. I know firsthand when people are applying and they feel like their resume is going into a black hole of nothing. They feel like, well, working with a staffing firm is a necessary evil. I've heard that multiple times on both the candidate and client side of things. And I think changing this framework would make people want to work with us. It completely changes the shift of, well, I have to work with that staffing firm because I've been unemployed for a month or two now and I'm down on my luck and I need somebody to, I want to work with Brad Staffing.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things that is a real opportunity
Mhm.
is AI, right? Like
Sure.
there was so much promise a couple of years ago when people were talking about AI and staffing and how it was going to be, such a great tool. It was going to make it easier to be a matchmaker. It was going to make it easier to review resumes. And now you look online and you see people just saying like, I can't even get my resume to a human. I can't get past the AI filter. I can't, get to somebody. And some of the really easy, low hanging fruit seeming things from the outside of, like letting somebody know if they didn't get that thing that they were considered for, or letting somebody know if they weren't a match, or telling somebody, hey, I see this gap that I need to be addressed. Some of the things that should be easier with technology feel like oftentimes it's creating even more of a gap between what someone was hoping to experience as a candidate and what the reality of their experience is. And so when you have somebody who feels, disillusioned because they didn't get a response, or they were promised they would hear something back in 48 hours and now it's been 10 days. And they're like, does that person even care that I exist? Was there, a problem that they're not telling me about? Like, it just creates all of these sort of open loops in people's minds of, what's wrong, or worse, what's wrong with me.
Hey, it's Brad taking a quick break to tell you about an offer for the first 7 people who find me on LinkedIn. We recently launched Rogue IQ, the AI marketing assistant built for staffing firms. I'm so excited about what this tool can do. I convinced our co-CEO to let me give away some free trials. So the first 7 people who act on this will get 1 free month of content. That's blogs, social posts, and SEO pages completely free. All custom to your company and target audience. Here's what you do. Open LinkedIn right now, find me, Brad Biley, and send me one word, Rogue IQ, ROG-IQ. The first 7 people get access to 1 month of marketing content, no catch. Again, open LinkedIn right now, find me, Brad Biley, and send me one word, Rogue IQ. That's it. All right, let's get back to the show. You're reminding me of a quote that I use in a bunch of my talks from Mark Schaefer. He says, the most human company wins. If we use that as our constant guide and filter, we'll be okay. That the most human company wins. And I think we've gotten away from ourselves in a bit with AI. We're trying to do things better. We're trying to offload these C and D level tasks at the expense of losing a lot of our human touch. And in staffing and recruiting, where the human element is what sets us apart, which is why a candidate or a client would want to work with us in the first place, I have argued that we need to bring more of that back into the equation. And I think that creates superfans, right? People want to work with Brad the recruiter because of how Brad the recruiter made them feel.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I think a lot of companies think about a little bit backwards is they spend a ton of money on marketing and advertising and don't spend a ton of money on those actual human touch points. And if you think about it, everybody, like, let's say everybody who has tried to talk to Brad the recruiter, every candidate who's looking for a job, their experience with and exposure to your company is so much greater than somebody who maybe saw an ad somewhere or was part of a campaign. So that when someone asks them, what was your experience with Brad the recruiter, not only do they have a much more formed experience, but their story is going to be more memorable. They're more likely to be saying things. So it's like companies spend all this money on kind of like top of funnel, trying to create awareness, trying to build this brand. But then if you've got people who have actually like come into that funnel that have a negative or bad experience with you, or like just sort of a, neutral experience that was forgettable, that is such a detriment. And if you reallocate some of that top of funnel stuff to just having a little bit more human touch, or being able to, add a little bit of extra, person power where those interactions are happening, there is an outsourced ROI on that, because now you have people saying, even if they, didn't get the job, you have people saying like, wow, it was a really great experience. They, I know that they're in my corner. And even if it, the first couple of things didn't work, like I know there's somebody there who knows me, who's looking out for me, who's keeping me top of mind for whatever those opportunities are that come up.
I love that. And we don't see a lot of those reviews come through. It's a tough industry, right? For every 100 people that apply, one person gets the job. So you automatically create 99 Twitter warriors who are now frustrated that they didn't get the job. And the thought of flipping that to, well, how can we create an experience so good that 99 people might be frustrated they didn't get the job, but are still excited that they went through the process, would completely change the game in staffing and recruiting.
Well, and that they know, okay, because this is a staffing and recruiting company, there's going to be 500 more jobs this year, right? It's not going direct to a company where there's 3 more jobs. It's if I make a good impression and continue to engage with this company, yeah, maybe I wasn't the one of the 100 this time, but maybe I will be next time.
Why don't businesses inherently try to create more 5-star experiences? I think we're on an interesting point of no one leaves a 3-star review. And I don't think we're trying to create sort of mediocrity. We don't want mediocre service day after day, but I think in a lot of cases, we probably are providing mediocre service. We're just doing the bare minimum to get the job done. We're creating 3 stars of service.
Right.
Why don't we strive? Yeah,
okay.
Please.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, so I'm so glad that you asked. Number one, I think And I would be interested to hear your perspective on this as somebody who works in staffing. I think like years from now, when we look back on this period of time, probably going back to like, I don't know, the 70s or 80s, certainly through, like the more recent history. I think the thing that people are going to scratch their heads and say, like, that was an interesting choice to make is to use a very scientific term here, the over siloification of departments. And this idea of like, we're going to have a very strict hierarchy of like, we've got the worker and then they've got their manager and then there's the director and then there's the VP and they report up this way and then it goes over this way and it's like, well, that's the sales department, that's the marketing department, that's the customer service department, that's the operations department, that's the financial department. And there's not a lot of cross-departmental collaboration. It's a lot of like up, over, down, right? For a conversation to happen. Just like very inefficient bureaucracy, like layers and layers of like policies and procedures. And again, it's very, I could see where maybe like pre-internet that kind of made sense in a lot of industries because you had to sort of like go over. But I think what it's done is created this ecosystem in many companies where there's like such a sense of like, not my department, not my problem, or
Yeah,
not my department, not my interest. And if you think about a customer on the outside, nobody has ever been like, that was a different department. Like, my bad. I'm like less angry now, or I don't care as
right.
much now. It's like, no, they see one company. Like, you are this company, help me with the thing, fix my problem, do what I'm paying you to do. But internally, it's like, oh, well, like I've got to forward it to this person. And then this person's going to forward it to another person who's going to forward it to another person. So, like, nobody is thinking in many instances holistically about the totality of that customer experience from pre-purchase to repurchase. And so I think when you look at like small businesses, like a lot of the companies that have come in and stolen market share and been really disruptive, it's because they weren't starting with 100 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people. They were starting with a handful of people saying like, we are all in the experience department. It is up to
Yeah,
everybody to like do these things. So I think that's part of it is that in many instances, people have been told like, this is your job, be a robot, perform the operations that we've told you to perform. We don't want you to use creativity. We don't want you to like, look for another way. We're giving you the manual and saying like, do this, do this. Uh, so I think that is part of it, right? Is that you have people that are like, I did a really good job on my little one piece of the pie, and then somebody else is doing their one little piece. And it's oftentimes that handoff between departments or the things that involve like multiple, whether it's, steps of the process or departments or, over a long period of time, like those are the ones where like it goes a little bit sideways. And then another thought that I have that I think also is a big part of it, and then we can kind of talk about how those two play together is, many people crave novelty. Like we get bored when stuff is repetitive. And like one of the things that I like to say is repetition isn't boring, it's branding. It's like doing the same things again and again and again and again and again and again and again. But many people, me included, sometimes struggle with that because our brain's like, well, but like we want to try something new. We want to try something different. And oftentimes, unintentionally, when we are trying new things or seeking that novelty, we can fall off on some of the things that were really helpful or successful that we're just not being as intentional about as we used to be because we've like veered from the process. So I think that those are two of the reasons. I'm sure we could find many, many more, but you're right. It's not like people wake up and say like, how do I be average today? Or like, what's the best way to do the least amount possible to like check the box and move on? But the other, and I'll throw this one as my third one and then I'll stop talking. I think we also, in every industry, like what you incentivize, what you focus on, what you obsess over is like what results you're driving. And there's been such an emphasis on acquisition for so long across so many companies that this idea of like create a customer, create a customer, create a customer, and acting as if all customers are created equal when we know it's not. We know that longtime customers, not only do they have the higher lifetime value, but they're more likely to refer more people. Like there's so much benefit to like keeping your customers. But I think people, it's like sometimes sexier or more fun, or people are compensated based on acquisition, not retention. And I don't even think retention is enough. I say often that, retention is a lagging indicator. I think it's really about how many of your customers are driving new customers. Like, what is your actual earned growth? What percentage of your new customers are coming from your existing customers who are telling their friends? So focus on acquisition over retention, over compartmentalization, um, and then, this like novelty seeking human nature, I think are perhaps the three big culprits.
It's no secret prospects are harder to reach. Buyers are more skeptical, and make more calls isn't a growth strategy anymore. At Smart Ideas Summit 6, Haley Marketing celebrates 30 years by showing you how to build a smarter growth engine. Join us Tuesday, September 29th for 7 hours and 14 speed talks from the staffing industry's brightest minds. You can save your seat today at smartideas.haleymarketing.com. All right, let's get back to the show. I think we love the hunt. We love the chase of a new logo. I have said for years at Haley now that we should be trying to get deeper with our current customers, develop stronger relationships with our current customers to try to get more business from our current customers. We're constantly in a sales role looking for the new shiny object, which is the new logo. And if instead we just said, okay, well, how this quarter can we get more business from our current customers? It completely changes the conversation, the marketing, the sales tactics, everything that we might be doing. And if we could create, in your world, super fans out of the current customers we have, our businesses would be fine as it is. We wouldn't necessarily need to chase those new logos and chase vacancies. We would have a sustainable business model based on what would happen with our current accounts.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because so many businesses, when you say, okay, like let's look at all the clients that you had last year, why did these, 20% of them have not returned, and we would have expected them to return based on the average sales cycle. Like, why did they not return?
Yeah.
People don't know. So it's
Right.
like, oh, we never asked them, or we're not sure, or that just, sort of fizzled out. And so because of that, oftentimes people get into this space of wanting to like discount because they think, oh, we must have lost on price. When oftentimes you didn't lose on price, you lost on service, but you don't know that because you didn't ask them or they didn't tell you because it
Mm,
like, think about how many times you've been dissatisfied with a business
yes.
that you've just, like, moved on because you're like,
Yes.
"Well, it's not my job to make you better. Like, you already didn't do a great job by me. Why should I do the charitable thing of, like, giving you feedback or telling like, that's not on me, that's on you," right? And so, oftentimes, you don't even know why your customers are leaving, and then, as I said, you can, sometimes make the wrong assumptions and cost yourself profit margin in the sort of to add insult to injury,
I love talking about
rather than
price.
just, like, fixing the thing, right? Like, just
Yeah.
fixing it like, the thing that was wrong.
I love talking about price. Our industry gets beat up on price all the time, on markups all the time. It's a race to the bottom. It's our customers are trying to drive down markups as low as they can, and they pin staffing firms against each other trying to get the lowest possible markup. And in my mind, you're only competing on price when you don't have an experience that is worth paying for. Right? Like there's a reason people spend $10 on shorts at Target, and there's a reason people spend 150 on Lulu's. There's a perceived value with both of those items, and both are fine. There's no difference in terms of whether or not they're clothing items. They're both totally fine. But you pay for the experience, how you feel, you pay for how it makes you feel mentally, physically, all of that. And I think too often we discount our services because we don't know what makes us unique. We don't know why someone should pay that premium. We don't know why you should come to me and pay a 30% markup or whatever it might be, because at the end of the day, our clients see us as a commodity. They see us as the exact same thing, apples to apples. And if instead you're comparing apples to oranges, you can, in theory, charge whatever you want, within reason, of course, because you're in a different league.
Absolutely, and that's why that first pillar of the Supermodel S, start with your story, is all about answering the question, like, why would someone be our super fan? What is it that we're doing that is deserving of someone to not just come back, but to talk about us to their friends? And if you can't answer that question, guess what? There is not a snowball's chance that your clients are going to be able to answer that question. Like, if every person on your team isn't answering that question in the same way, then there's a really good chance that there's brand confusion or dilution in the marketplace.
We went through S and U. What's the P in super?
So P stands for personalize. And that's one of my favorites because it's where your story and theirs combine. So that's when it's all about, how do I make this person feels like this was a one size fits one solution for them? How do I make every single client feel like the most important client that I have?
How do you do that when you need to maintain profits? You certainly can't spend hours upon hours providing outlandish service for some customers opposed to others not getting that level of service. How do you create that one of one experience within reason?
Well, there's really two types of personalization, broadly speaking. It's high tech and high touch. High tech are all the things that you can automate, all of the things that you can use technology to deliver. And then high touch are the ones that you can't, like the noticing, paying attention in the moment. And I always say when you're thoughtful and intentional about how they both come together, high tech and high touch create high impact. So being able to really drive a memorable experience. A good example of high tech, you usually fly Southwest or American Airlines because I live in Nashville, and those are usually like the two best cities to get me to wherever we go. But as we were talking about before we started recording, I travel a ton. I've done, I think it was 56 flights in the first half of the year. I just added everything up across all the different airlines. So like lots and lots of flying. I'll fly United and I'll fly Delta when they are the best option to get me to the city that I'm going to. But that's about it because they're, not oftentimes the best choice from Nashville because I'm just too close to Chicago and Atlanta for it to be like a major hub for either airline. So a couple of weeks ago, I was flying to, I think it was Minneapolis, and I was like, flew up on a Sunday, back on a Monday. And when I sat down on my Delta flight on Monday and the seat back TV, which, I'm not used to having because most of the
Right.
American flights don't have those. But
Yeah.
Southwest flights have those. And the TV said, "Welcome back, Brittany." And I was like, "Oh, that's nice." And I touched the screen and it said, "Do you want to resume the movie you were watching yesterday?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, I do, Delta. Thanks for asking." So that little tiny touch of being thoughtful and intentional made an impact because like think about when you go to like one of your streaming platforms. Sometimes you have to scroll for a while to get to I want to keep watching the thing that I stopped watching, an hour ago, a day ago, 3 days ago, whatever it was. And so little touches like that of saying, what do we know about our customer? Can we combine, consolidate information across different places to make their journey easier? Whether that's not having to repeat like the same information on a form, whether that's making everything available in a single like source of truth place for everyone on our team to look at and access. Like, what are all the ways that we can use technology to make the experience feel more personal? Because it's funny. I was sitting here looking at do you know Funko Pops, like the little like pop culture? Yeah. So like one of my favorite things to do is to send people codes to make their own Funko Pops. Like here's my little like Funko Brittany for anybody watching this right now. And she's got like a microphone and a foam finger and her hair, is sort of similar to mine. And what's cool is that like anybody can go on the Funko website and feel like they built something that looks sort of like them. But there's not that many choices because ultimately, like, there's only so many hair types, there's only so many hair colors, there's only so many options for accessories. But the end result is something that you feel like, wow, this was just for me. Like this represents me. And personalization in business is the same way. Like you think about what people want, they want to feel like they matter. They want to feel like they got a good deal. They want to feel like something didn't like waste their time. It wasn't unnecessarily complex, that somebody was listening to them. So it's the same few ingredients. And regardless of whether you're, going like step 1, step 3, step 7, step 6, whatever, like it doesn't matter. At the end, somebody feels like, wow, this was really great. And so personalization is all about, as I said before, both the high tech and the high touch ways that you can sort of say like, okay, we were going to make today we're making this kind of cake instead of this other kind of cake, or we're, putting sprinkles on the top of this one instead of icing, but the person still feels like, wow, you made this just for me because of the sprinkles. They don't know 2,700 other people are getting slightly different versions of those same sprinkles today.
What happens when your next prospect asks AI who the best staffing firms are and you're not mentioned? AI search is changing how buyers discover businesses. If you want to own Google and AI search before your competitors catch on, I want to help. Find me, Brad Biley, on LinkedIn and send me 3 letters, SEO. Our team will audit your website, provide 3 recommendations, and help make sure you show up where your buyers are actively searching. Again, just send me 3 letters on LinkedIn, SEO, and we'll take it from there. All right, let's get back to the show. I love the Delta story and in staffing and recruiting, and it might be an overplayed example, but it's the I just uploaded my resume and now on screen two of the application process, you're now asking me what school I went to and where I worked in my previous history, knowing darn well your software could have scraped all of this and put all of that information into these fields, and we could have had a conversation tomorrow about this. I don't need to re-enter all of this information. And I know that's low-hanging sort of complaint about the industry that I see far too often, but how could technology work for us, create sort of that personalized automation type of experience for us, and provide a better candidate and client experience?
Yeah. And the one thing about technology that we have to be a little bit careful of is that when personalization is done well, it feels either like invisible, like you don't even think about it. It's just so seamless. It's like, I always say like you go out to a restaurant, like you shouldn't be thinking about the temperature. You shouldn't be thinking about the volume of the music. Like these are things that should disappear into the background, right? Like when they're done well, we don't think about them. When they're done wrong, they're really obvious. So with technology, personalization when done right either is like invisible or it feels like a friend who knows you making a great recommendation. When it's done wrong, it feels creepy and intrusive or like way outdated technology. So it's all about the thoughtful, intentional touches of how you're deploying anything, which I think is probably like always been true. That's true of technology, but it's probably true of lots and lots of other things as well, is just thinking as your customer, like, or as your prospective potential customers that you're trying to attract, like looking at things through their.
I think AI is making that increasingly obvious. LinkedIn outreach is becoming increasingly obvious. I had somebody reach out to me the other day and say, "Hey, Brad, how about those Jets?" Because I live in Buffalo, New York, you would think they would ask about the Buffalo Bills, not the Jets that are 8 hours away from me. Just, you tried. I know what you're trying to do. I know what the software is trying to do. But again, left a bad experience instead of what could have been a very memorable one. Brittany, the Ian Super, walk us through that real quick.
So E stands for exceed expectations. And this is probably the most, like when people think about customer experience, this is what they typically think about. But the reason it's the fourth step in my framework instead of the first is because I think if you don't lay the groundwork with the others, it's going to be a good experience and people like forget your name. People are like, oh yeah, like that electrician did a really great job. Who was he again? Uh, they don't necessarily remember it because it's still like highly commoditized in their minds. So I, in my book, Creating Superfans, write about this idea of intentional experience design, which is really bringing attention and intention to all of the touch points that we know matter along the journey. So before, during, and after the actual purchase, saying, how do I find the neutral moments of this experience and elevate them? So for instance, if it's the like, you didn't get the job email, right? How do I make that not suck as much as it sucks to find out we didn't get the job? Or if it's the, hey, we're not going to know anything for 30 days, or the, this is the fifth time we've had to tell somebody no. Like, what are those moments that we know are happening again and again and again? And instead of just being like, there's nothing we can do about them, how can we be thoughtful and intentional about making it not sting or making it not be forgettable? And then also being more intentional about how do we maximize like the good moments? Like, how do we make those like more repeatable, more scalable?
Yeah, that's interesting. We're always thinking about the client kickoff. We're thinking about in the candidates, the candidates that did get the job. How do we wow people at these key moments of success in the partnership or the relationship? We're not thinking about the seventh email that we've sent to a candidate because they've applied with us every month for 7 months. And how do we spice that up? How do we elevate that? And I'm thinking even on my side of things, from a client experience side of things, the email that you send month after month, sort of that consistent touch point. How do we make that, in your words, suck less? I
Yeah.
think is incredibly enticing and incredibly important to think about.
Yeah. And I was just talking to a client the other day, and I like secret shopped them. And I'd signed up for the text alerts and I'd gotten, I don't know, something like 20 text messages in like 2 weeks. And they were all like, join now. This offer is going away. You have to join today. Today's the last day. You can say like, and I was like, okay, all of these probably seemed like fine messages and are like in, if you just like look at one of them at a time, there's nothing wrong with any of them. But for the person who's like looking at their phone, like they're texting me the same thing again and again and again and again, it
Yeah.
becomes noise very quickly. And I was like, I
Yeah.
would have unsubscribed 3 texts in had I not been doing this to see what you guys were, had I not been secret shopping you. And they were like, oh yeah, we never thought about like the whole stream. And I'm like, but that's how your customer views it, right? So you've got to be thinking about not just like that individual touch point on your end as its own thing existing in a silo, but thinking about how your customer is consuming it in their real life, in their world, like where that lives. The other thing that I mentioned this on stage at the Assured event where we met, my niece had the experience of she applied for and was offered her first job working with children in an occupational therapy environment. And she was so excited. She interviewed for the job, like not too far out of like graduated top of her class, was like the first real job she was ever applying for. And they offered her the job and they said, okay, we'll get back to you in a couple of days. Like we're just doing, the background verification. And as soon as that comes through, then you'll be able to like sign your paperwork and, we'll set your start date and all of that. And something like 2 weeks went by. And during that 2 weeks, the text messages I got from her, like she, called me. She was so excited. Like she had, she was like, they offered me the job. It went really well. I'm really excited. And then a couple days later, it was like, well, I haven't heard anything. Should I check in? Like I sent the thank you email. They haven't written back. They said it was going to take a couple of days for the ID verification. And then like over the next week, it was like, oh my gosh, do you think they found out about that speeding ticket I got when I was 17? Do you think they were interviewing other candidates after me and they liked someone else better? Like, what is it? Just went from I'm so excited to, well, clearly I'm not their first choice. And like, there's a reason I haven't heard from them for this period of time. And, I said, like, these things take time. Like they're probably really waiting on the background check. But by the time they got back to her, she had already started looking for other jobs because she was like, well, they must not have really liked me. And I don't want to put all of my eggs in this one basket because if they really liked me, they would have had me sign a contract. And, so she was already sort of like one foot out the door before she started at that job because of what happened in that interim from we want to hire you to like we have actually hired you. And so, and I'm sure on their mind, they were like the company was probably like, oh, we've told this girl she's going to get a job and then, we're going to like get back to her. And whether, I don't know, the background check did take a long time. Maybe the hiring manager went on vacation. Like, who knows what happened? But like from her perspective, it was this company loves me and really wants me to, well, I must be like their second or third or fourth choice. And so I'm not as excited as I would have been. And you think about that across any organization, the jobs they're hiring for, the roles they're hiring for, like it is so detrimental to every part of your company when you have a candidate come in and already be like a little bit indifferent to that position they're doing because they feel like they don't matter to the company.
Yeah, silence can create a wild internal narrative, unfortunately. And I think in staffing and recruiting, especially, we need to be incredibly mindful of that and make sure that we're doing everything we can to fill in the blanks and fill in the gaps there.
Absolutely.
Brittany, if you can, the R one more time in super.
The R stands for repeat. So repeat is all about the systems, the processes, the repetition. One of my favorite quotes that I use sometimes, Elizabeth Arden said, repetition makes reputation and reputation makes customers. And you go back to what you were saying before about like, what is your brand? What is your uniqueness? How are you making sure you're not competing just on price? And the way that you do that is through repetition. Because if people feel like, yeah, they usually do a great job, but like every now and then, I don't know, they're kind of not that much different from the other guys, then it dilutes your brand in a very real and very detrimental way. So R is all about the systems that we build internally and the processes that we put into place to ensure that everyone on the team knows that they are in the experience department. And the expectation is that they be super across all of these touch points.
And before I let you go, I want to give you the floor to share a little bit about yourself and your book.
All right. Well, thank you. My name is Brittany Hodak. I'm a customer experience keynote speaker. I help companies turn everyone in their organization into what I like to call acting chiefs of experience who know how to turn their customers into superfans. The book is Creating Superfans. It's available everywhere books are sold. And you can learn more at BrittanyHodak.com.
Before I let you go, one quick rapid fire question. One book that's fundamentally changed your life.
My gosh, how am I going to only choose one? Okay. I am gonna say the book Soundtracks by John Acuff. It's a really fantastic book. John Acuff has written, I don't know, probably like 7 or 8 books, and they're all great, and he's one of so many authors that I really, really enjoy. But the book Soundtracks is all about your internal narrative and how you can catch negative internal narratives and, like, flip them around and sort of retrain your brain to work a different way. And as somebody who never realized how negative some of my self-talk was sometimes, it was, like, really eye-opening for me. All of John's books are also, like, I don't wanna say easy reads, but they are. They're, like, very accessible. Like, he's, like, very smart and they're academic, but they're very, like, accessible for anybody. So you just feel like it's like a friend telling you jokes and teaching you things, not like reading a business book. So Soundtracks by John Acuff.
Yeah, I believe he wrote Finish, if I remember correctly. And that is all about how the job is not to be perfect, it's to finish the task at hand. And I loved that book because the whole thought of the hardest part isn't necessarily when you skip a day or when you stumble or when you fall, it's getting back up on day 2, right? If you have some sort of journey, everybody is going to fumble, everyone's going to fall, everyone's going to stumble, but it's getting back up and finishing the task and not letting day 1 turn into day 2.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yep.
great book, and I will definitely check out the other.
Yeah,
Brittany,
his new book is also really great. It's called Procrastination Proof. And for anybody listening who's like, oh, these all sound like things that I would be interested in, his podcast is also one of my favorites. It's called All It Takes Is a Goal. And look at this, I have his book right here. Yeah, Procrastination Proof is the new book. All It Takes Is a Goal is the podcast. And yeah, I agree. All of his stuff is like really, really good. And it's funny. It's like, I feel like he's funny in real life, but he's really funny in
yeah.
his books.
Brittany, really appreciate your time. It was great meeting you in Nashville. Great having you on the show. Appreciate taking the stage with us.
Thanks so much, Brad.